Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains near Babb, Montana. Glacier National Park is only 4 miles to the west, and the U.S.-Canada border is 10 miles to the north. The town sits at 4,500 feet in elevation and rests in the shadow of peaks that tower over 9,000 feet high. West of the town, the valleys are packed with sprawling forests of pine, fir, and spruce trees, beautifully interrupted by patches of quaking aspen. Along the creeks and streams, willow and berry bushes screen elk, white-tailed deer, and moose. The predators in this area include black bears, cougars, coyotes, wolves, and grizzly bears. In recent years, it has been noted that grizzly bears are slowly making their way out of the mountains and along the riparian zones of rivers that were their previous habitat. With healthy populations existing in Yellowstone National Park as well as Glacier National Park, the bears are seeking habitat in the western Great Plains, slowly but surely. The black triangles on the map represent locations that grizzly bears have been spotted, but are outliers from their designated habitat boundaries. If nothing else, this map shows that grizzly bears are not predictable and can move into territory without drawing a lot of attention. Around 7 a.m. on Friday, July 12, 2013, 71-year-old Patty Miller was out for a walk with her dogs. Her partners, Angus and Seamus, were of the Havanese dog breed. According to the American Kennel Club, these shaggy Cuban bundles of personality are only about a foot tall at the shoulder and might tip the scales at 13 pounds soaking wet on a tiny scale. They're off the charts when it comes to affection and companionship, but one thing they aren't that good at is fending off grizzly bears. Now, Patty had rented a trailer near the town of Babb for the last 3 years to be closer to her brother, and because she enjoyed it there. Her brother owned a fishing cabin about a quarter-mile away from her trailer on the shores of Duck Lake. Each day she and Seamus and Angus would go for a walk around the lake and enjoy the fresh air and rejuvenating scenery. This Friday was a great day, as the temperatures were in the upper 50s with no wind and fair skies. Just the kind of day that allowed a person to take in all that big sky. Angus was the larger of the 2 dogs, but when the dogs are that little, being bigger doesn't mean much. As Patty prepared for their walk, Angus was being stubborn and didn't want to go. He tried to hide and refused to come toward the door, which was unusual. He always liked to go for walks any time Patty would take them, and she figured he would warm up to the idea once he was outside. She put her cell phone holster on her belt, alongside her emergency whistle and her bear spray. Then she grabbed Angus and headed toward the door. The lake was fringed with trees, but the road was in the open, with good visibility on all sides. This may have been convenient to see anything nearby, like a bear or a moose, but it meant that the sun would beat down with greater intensity, even on cooler days. After a short walk, Patty began to warm up, so she decided to take her jacket off and tied it around her waist and walked on. As the trio continued to walk, Patty noticed that there were none of the natural sounds. No birds chirping or squirrels chittering. The quiet was eerie, but was broken by an ominous twig snap just a few yards away. Now Patty had heard the basics of bear safety from her brother. He had warned her that if she ever ran into a bear, to keep her eyes low and avoid directly looking into their eyes. He had also discussed the best way to dispense bear spray, starting from the ground near you and raising the fog toward the bear to create a large cloud for the bear to run into. If all else fails, he told her, then fold yourself into a ball with your head and chest toward the ground and play dead. If she had a run-in with a bear that went beyond that, then she was on her own, as she didn't carry a firearm. Patty's head quickly swiveled toward the sound of the snapping twig just as 2 fuzzy little grizzly cubs tumbled out of the bushes onto the road. For a moment she was caught in wonder at how cute they were, then she was filled with terror as she saw what was close behind them. Not more than 30 feet from Patty and her dogs, a huge grizzly sow was moving through the trees toward her cubs. As soon as the sow's eyes caught sight of Patty, she stood to her hind legs. Patty was terrified at the sight of the bear towering over her by several feet, and all of the cautions of what not to do when you encounter a bear flashed through her mind. They say don't panic, but an 8-foot-tall angry mama bear has a way of inducing that in a person's mind. They say stand your ground, but that would mean nothing short of a fist fight with an animal that outweighs you by several hundred pounds and is armed with huge claws and powerful jaws. They say get aggressive, but I'm sure anyone facing a giant bear has to search pretty hard to find that much courage. They say to avoid getting eaten by covering up vulnerable parts of your body, but that means the bear will have an opportunity to inflict serious damage to your body or kill you. They say play dead, and the bear will likely lose interest in you, but that would expose you to the same risks as the prior step. The sow let out a roar that would rattle the windows of cabins nearby, then dropped to all fours and bounded toward Patty. Thinking she'd met her end, Patty opted for a more primitive reaction than all the scientists and researchers advise. She dashed for the brush and dove in head first. Angus and Seamus weren't taking the coward's way out. They rallied to Patty's defense by jumping a few feet in the air for the chance of biting the bear's muzzle. As she ran, the sow swatted at the dogs, like a dairyman swatting flies. Patty reached her hand down to pull out her bear spray, but was too overwhelmed to retrieve it from its holster properly. The irony of seeing such beautiful scenery behind the angry grizzly charging toward her resonated in her mind for a brief second. Given she couldn't utilize her bear spray, Patty opted to try the curling into a ball strategy that her brother had discussed with her. She put her arms alongside her head and covered her neck with her hands. As she dropped to the ground, the sow swatted her right arm away from her head, tattering the flesh as her claws tore their path. Pain shot through her arm for a moment as she collapsed to the ground. The sow's teeth tore through her scalp in 3 destructive and rapid bites to Patty's head. Though she had managed to curl into a ball, the sow somehow flipped her over and out of the bushes in which she was sheltering. Now on her back and not in a ball anymore, Patty was completely vulnerable to the bear's will. With a single swat, the sow ripped 4 deep gashes that started near Patty's belly button and ran all the way up to her neck. Patty felt a rush of anger wash over her at the thought of her death just before she lost consciousness. A high-pitched and repeated bark was the next thing Patty heard. She opened her eyes to see Seamus staring at her, but he was alone. She instantly knew Angus was dead, or he would be right there beside Seamus. Pain racked her body. Her arm hurt like crazy and her head pounded, but she was alive, for now. While pulling herself to her feet, Patty clicked the latch on Seamus's leash. He lit out like he was fired from a cannon, heading for home. Patty knew she would have to get help quickly and decided to call 911 from her cell phone. It should be easy to get to her, given she was on the road, so she reached down to her cell phone holster on her belt. It was then that she realized that in her rushed departure and trying to gather Angus, she had forgotten to clip her cell phone into the holster. It was sitting on the counter back at her home and would do her no good right now. Patty knew that her only option was to walk out to find help or walk until help found her. She stumbled a few yards and was overcome with nausea and dizziness. Her head pounded with the sound of her blood rushing through veins and arteries. She reached down toward her belt once again, and this time retrieved her emergency whistle. Staggering her way down the dirt road, Patty blew her whistle and yelled until she was out of breath. By then the wind had picked up and drowned out her cries. She could feel herself slipping, and knew shock was setting in, so she sat down to collect her senses. At 11:40 a.m., a truck bounced down the road toward Patty. She waved them down and asked them to help her. How she had survived the last 3 hours, she wasn't sure, but she wasn't about to let the first people she'd seen up to this point refuse. The truck was full of kids who had been invited to go fishing with their bus driver. They crowded around Patty and helped her into the truck while they called 911 on the school bus driver's cell phone. A short ways down the road, Patty's sister-in-law hailed the truck and asked if they'd seen a little dog. She was searching for Angus because Seamus had apparently ran to her house to get help for Patty. As soon as her sister-in-law saw Patty in the back of the truck, she jumped in with her. Placing her shirt over Patty's body and laying on top of her to keep her warm, her sister-in-law reassured Patty. About 6 miles down the road, an ambulance pulled into view as the truck skidded to a stop. The medics loaded Patty onto a gurney and into the back of the ambulance.
Within 40 minutes, they pulled into the emergency room entrance at the Blackfeet Community Hospital in Browning. By this time, Patty's eyes had swollen shut from the damage done by the sow bites to her head. The staff cut away her clothes to examine her for additional wounds. They started an IV and administered 4 pints of blood. Realizing Patty's injuries were too serious for the small hospital, they arranged for a medical helicopter to fly her to Kalispell Regional Medical Center in Kalispell. As soon as the helicopter landed in Kalispell, Patty was rushed into the first of 4 operations she would have to endure over the coming few days. This one lasted for 7.5 hours, but she wasn't out of the woods just yet. During that surgery, the doctors would discover that the bear had severed nearly every muscle on the back of Patty's neck and missed her carotid artery by a fraction of an inch. It had ripped off one of her ears, crushed her jaw back into her skull, and fractured her cheekbones. Her nose was also broken, but that paled in comparison to the rest of her frightening injuries. During the surgeries, deep lacerations in her neck, the 3 bite wounds to her head, and deep gashes running up her body were cleaned and sutured shut. For 3 weeks, Patty slowly recuperated in the hospital, under constant observation from the staff of the intensive care unit. Reconstructive surgery was needed to insert 24 pins to put her facial bones back in place, but could do nothing to repair the severed nerve that opened her right eye. It remained permanently closed in a prolonged wink at the Grim Reaper. After many months of grueling rehabilitation, Patty indicated she's just grateful to be alive. Of all the possible outcomes, her injuries were the preferred option. She does miss her little Angus, though. His body was discovered by her neighbor and then laid to rest on Patty's brother's land, but she can't visit his grave. It's just too painful for her. Upon her release from the hospital, Patty returned to her trailer and its beautiful location. She refuses to let that bear rob her of her enjoyment of the outdoors, and was hiking with Seamus soon thereafter, minus one of their beloved partners. As they walk, Seamus glances around, still searching for his brother Angus. For those of you wondering what became of the sow and her cubs, no action was taken against them. Her behavior was classified as within the expected behavior of a sow grizzly protecting her cubs from what she perceived as a threat. Wow, that was a real tearjerker, folks. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Did Seamus and Angus contribute to an aggravating aspect of the bear attack, or would that sow have attacked Patty anyway? Would a firearm have changed the outcome of this attack? Would it have made any difference if Patty hadn't run away from the sow? Frankly, I really doubt it. Finally, do you think Patty may have lived because Angus was watching out for her after he departed? The thought of a little fluffy guardian angel makes me smile. I'll enjoy reading and replying to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.